Yomא, Parak Gimel, Mishnah Aleph. Amar lahem hamamuna. From the end of Parak Aleph until this point in the Masechta, the Mishnayos discussed different avodas in the Beis HaMikdash that were not specific to Yom Kippur. Now we get back to discuss the halachas of Yom Kippur, which we learned that the Kohen Gadol was kept occupied on Leil Yom Kippur until the time for the Shchitas HaTamid. Now we're continuing with that from that point on. So this is right before or getting ready for the Karban Tamid Yom Kippur morning. Amlem HaMamuna, who's the Mamuna, an appointed one, who's the Sgan Kohen Gadol, says to the Kohanim, go out to the high place in the Azara and see whether the time for shechting the Karban Tamid had arrived. The Tzur Ua Makum Gavoya Shahoil Hem B'Mikdash, go see if it's his man Shchita. Why? Because we know that the Shchita Psula Balaylo Shadnema B'Yem Zevchachem. Shchita is puzzle if it's done at night. It needs to be done by day, because like the pasuk says, B'Yem Zevchachem. Im Higia, if the light has arrived, Haraya Omer Bar Kai, the one who saw it would say there is light. Bar Kai is Heir V'Hivrik Hashachar, it's Lashon of Barak, it's Lashon of bringing light. It also has Oishi's Baker in there. Matisya ben Shmuel Omer, Matisya ben Shmuel says, who is that? We mentioned him in Shkalim as being in charge of the different things in Perek Hay in Shkalim. Let's see exactly what his role was. Matisya ben Shmuel ala Paisais. He was in charge of the Pais. So he was there in the morning because they would do Paisos, but probably not on Yom Kippur. So Matisya ben Shmuel says that he would wait until the Kohen announced, Heir Pnei Kol HaMizrach. The entire eastern horizon has lit up. The Kohanim standing below would ask him, Acha b'Chevron, has the light spread until Chevron? And he would say yes, and only then would they shech the Tamid. Why Chevron? Because to be maskir schus avos, ukdei lahaskir schus avos maskirin Chevron. And we could use extra schusim on Yom Kippur, so therefore we mentioned the schus avos. The Gemara has arichas about this, but we're going to leave it for now. Mishnah Beis. The Mishnah explains why someone had to be sent up to a high place to see whether the time for the Shchitas HaTamid had arrived, to check if it's light. Because once happened on a cloudy night that the moonlight rose in the east just before daybreak. But they thought that the east was lit by the sun. And they shechted the Tamid before daybreak. They had to take the Tamid out of the area designated for burning a carbon that's puzzle. From that time onward, they looked from a high place to make sure that the light was from the sun. Haridu Kohen Gadol lebeis hatfila. After it was announced that there was light in the sky, they took the Kohen Gadol down to the mikveh so he could be tevel before shechting the Tamid. No Kohen may enter the chatzar of the Azara of the Beis HaMikdash without first being tevel in the mikveh, as we're going to see in the next Mishnah. And what happens next? Zeh haklal. This is the rule in the Beis HaMikdash. Kol ha-mesech es raglav, ton tefillah. Whoever goes to the Beis HaKisei for Gedolim needs to be tevel in the mikveh before going back to do the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. Why? The Mishnah refers to a kohen who was already tevel before he entered the Beis HaMikdash. He's not required again unless he went to the Beis HaKisei for Gedolim. V'chol ha-matal mayim ton kiddush yadayim v'reglayim. Whoever goes to the Beis HaKisei for Ketanim requires kiddush yadayim v'reglayim, hands and feet from the kiyar, before returning to his service. This is interesting to Zach, because in a certain oifen, do you need an netilas yadayim with the kli? We always ask, and a lot of places hold it. You don't when you come out, but in the Beis HaMikdash there were extra makbid on this. The kiyar was a large basin that stood in the zara of the Beis HaMikdash. It was right next to the mizbeach, and it had different faucets. A kohen who had to be mekadosh yod v'raglav would stand next to the kiyar, place his hand on his right foot and his left hand on his left foot, and he rubbed his feet with the water that flowed onto them from the kiyar. In fact, a kohen may not begin serving in the Beis HaMikdash before washing his hands and feet with water from the kiyar, as mentioned in Masechta Tamid. Our Mishnah, which specifies a kohen who went to the Beis HaKisei, speaks of one who had already begun the service of that day. Fine. Mishnah Gimel. Ein adam nichnas la'azara la'avoda afilu tahar ad sheyitbal. A person may not enter the Azara for the purpose of doing any sort of avoda afilu tahar, even if he's completely tahar ad sheyitbal, unless he's tevel in a mikveh. This is a chiyuv in the Raisa in order to do this. So in order to ensure that a kohen doesn't serve in the base of Mikdash without first being Taivel, the Chachamim were geyser that one must be Taivel before entering the Azara for any reason, even if he's not going to do Avodah. The Mishnah specifies, and in Nichnas Lazar Avodah, because that was the subject at the end of the previous Mishnah. Afilu Tahar, even if he's completely Tahar, Ad Sheyitbat, until he is Taivel. The Mishnah now returns to where it left off in the middle of the previous Mishnah with the Kohen Gadol about to be Taivel. Gives an overview, I guess, of the tefillas that the Kohen Gadol had to do on Yom Kippur. There were 5 times that he was Taivel, and 10 times the Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim that the Kohen did on that day. The Kohen Gadol was mechuyev to be Taivel before he entered the Azar in the morning, just like any other Kohen. In addition, he had to be Taivel before each of the 4 times that he changed his begadim. As we mentioned in the Akdama to the Masechta, in total, he was Taivel 5 times. Kohen Gadol also had to wash his hands and feet every time he put on or took off a set of clothing. This happened 10 times during the day. Once when he put on the big day kahuna at the beginning of the day, and once before and once after each of the 4 changes of the clothing mentioned above, and the 10th time was when he took off the big day kahuna at the end of the day. V'kulam b'kodesh al beis parva. They were all done in the kodesh, meaning in the Azara, on top of the chamber called the Beis HaParva. The tefillas that took place during the Avodah of Yom Kippur, except for the first one, had to be done in a Makom Kadosh, like the pasuk says, "V'rachat es b'sorei b'mayim a Makom Kadosh." He should be tovel himself in the water in a Makom Kadosh. Chutz b'zubul vad. Besides for this one, the first one, which was done after the Azara. The first tefillah had to take place after the Azara because one may not enter the Azara before toveling, as the Mishnah mentioned before. It was done in a mikveh above the Shar HaMayim, which was in the southern wall of the Azara. That's the Beis HaParva. Mishnah Dalet. Pirsu Sodin Shalbutz Beinei Lebein Ha'am. They spread out a sheet of linen. The linen sheet reminded the Kohen Gadol that he was going to be putting on white clothing, white garments for the Avodah that were specific to Yom Kippur, and not wear the big day Zahav. So they spread out the Sodin Shalbutz Beinei Lebein Ha'am between the Kohen Gadol and the people for purposes of tznius. Not everybody should see him changing. Parshat Yard v'Taval. He took off his ordinary clothing, went down to the mikveh, and was titled Olav and Stapag, came up from the mikveh, and wiped himself off, dried himself off. Hevila Big Day Zahav, they brought him the golden begadim, the 8 begadim that he usually wore when he was doing the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash on a regular day. But Lovash v'Kiddush Yodav Raglav. He put them on, and was Bekadosh his hands and feet in the Kiyah. The 8 begadim are mentioned later in Perek Zayin, because 4 of them were made out of gold or contained gold. They're called the Big Day Zahav. Even on Yom Kippur, he wore them for the services for the Avodah that were also done every other day of the year. Whenever the Kohen Gadol changed from the Big Day Zahav to the Big Day Lavan, or the other way around, he washed his hands and feet twice, once before removing the old begadim, and once after putting on the new begadim. Here, however, he didn't wash before undressing, because washing is required only when removing Big Day Kodesh and not when removing his regular personal clothing. Now, the Kohen Gadol is about to start doing the actual Avodah. So the following Avodas were performed every day of the year, usually by anybody, any Kohen. And Yom Kippur, however, they're not good unless they're done by the Kohen Gadol. We saw that it's Machlekes Rishonim, but we're going to go with this now, that this is for most Shitas hold. Heviu leis hatamid, they brought him the lamb for the carbon tamid, kertzai. He cut most of the way through its windpipe and esophagus, which is the minimum necessary for a valid shchita. So kertzai, he kept it kurtz, he kept it short. It was the hechsher shchita bilvad. Umerik achar shchita al yadeh. Another person finished shechting for him, so he could quickly grab a bowl with which to catch the blood of the tamid. The Kabbalah is the avodah which had to be done by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Although the shchita done by the Kohen Gadol is good enough for a valid shchita, another person finished it so that the blood should flow freely from the animal. Kibul Asadam, he caught the blood of the tamid in a bowl, carried the bowl to the mizbeach uzarkai, and he threw the blood against the walls of the mizbeach. Nichnas lahaktir kteres al shachar. He then entered the kodesh to burn the daily morning kteres on the inside of mizbeach, on the mizbeach hapanimi lahetiv esaneros, and to refresh the lamps of the menorah by cleaning out the ash that had burnt out wicks. Then he went out at the kodesh to be makar of the rosh and the evarim of the tamid, as well as the chavitin, which was the karban mincha, and the yayin. The Kohen Gadol carried the evarim of the tamid and his daily chavitin to the mizbeach and threw them onto the fire. He also took the yain and he poured it. He did a nisuch hayayin on the mizbeach. The Mishnah does not mention the mincha that accompanied the tamid because it's included in the chavitin, which was also carbon mincha. Right? Okay. Mishnah Hey. Ketairis shel shachar ha'sekreva ben dam le'evarim. The ketairis of the morning was brought between the zrika and burning the evarim of the morning. In the morning, therefore, the seder dvarim was hazay. The Eresh Tezachas, the first thing that they did was the dam tamid was thrown against the mizbeach. Number 2, the ketairis was burned on the mizbeach hapnimi. Number 3, the evari hatamid were burnt on the mizbeach. In fact, the ketairis wasn't burned immediately before the tamid's evarim because the lamps of the menorah were cleaned between these two avodas, as we mentioned in the previous Mishnah. The point of the Mishnah is that the two avodas involving the tamid, meaning the zrikas hadam and the evarim on the mizbeach, were not done consecutively. Rather, there was a break between them. Okay. Shel bein rabayim bein evarim lanasachim. But the ketairis of the afternoon they were makrivet. The Kohen Gadol was makrivet between the evarim of the Talmud Shel Bein Arbayim and offering the Nesachim of the Talmud Shel Bein Arbayim. The word Nesachim here refers to the two items that are linked to the Talmud, which is always. There was a mincha and there was wine. The mincha that's burnt on the Mizbeach. Although this literally means pouring, which usually refers to just the wine, it's used here in other places to include the flour as well. I know that from Gemaras throughout. If the Kohen Gadol was older, delicate, and couldn't bear the cold mikvah water, they would heat up water for him before Yom Kippur. The water had to be heated before Yom Kippur because heating water is a malacha which is asur on Shabbos and Yom Kippur. And they would cast into it the cold mikvah. They would heat up water for him before Yom Kippur, and they would pour that into the cold mikvah water on Yom Kippur, so that it would lose some of its chill. The hot water didn't heat the mikvah water to such an extent that this would be considered cooking. It merely took the edge of the mikvah's coldness and was manageable for the Kohen Gadol. And he was a little bit tired also, so maybe it was a little colder, but I don't know that we were considering that Bechlal, because we want him to be, imagine he's going to be very focused on his avodah of the day. Mishnah Vav. After the Kohen Gadol did the regular daily avodah of the Tamid, he made hachanas for the avodah that were done only for Yom Kippur. So now he changed from the big day Zahav into big day Lavan. So they brought him to the mikvah on top of the Beis HaParva, which was in the Kodesh, which was in the Azara. They spread a linen sheet between him and the people. Kiddush Yod of the Raglav of Pashat. He was mekadosh his hands and feet to remove the big day Zahav that he was wearing. Rameir Ermer Pashat Kiddush Yod of Raglav. But Rameir says he first removed the big day Zahav and then he was mekadosh his hands and feet. Kohen Gadol washed, as we mentioned earlier, the Kohen Gadol washed twice at each change of clothing. According to the Tanna Kama, the first washing was in honor of the old garments, and the second was in honor of the new ones. He remained dressed in his old garments when he washed the first time, and he got dressed in his new begadim before he washed the second time. However, according to Rameir, both washings were for the new set of begadim. The first before he put them on, and the second was after he put them on. Yorad v'taval olav and mustapik. He went down to the mikveh, was tavel, came up from the mikveh and dried himself off. They brought him the white begadim, the big day lavan that were worn specifically for the avodah of Yom Kippur, and he put them on, and he was bekadosh yod v'raglav. What he wore in Yom Kippur was the kseinis mechnasayim amnei temetz nefes. It's mentioned in Achrei Mos. Shekol avodas pnimiyos hayu behen. All the avodas pnimiyos were done wearing big day lavan. Avodas chitzonios kegain tmidin and musavar have big day zav shemashamish ben kol shana kula. The other avodas of the Tmidin and Musafin were done while the Kohen Gadol was wearing the big day Zahav, and it was like the clothing that he would wear the whole year. And Lava Shakidja the Varaglav, he put them on, it was Mekadosh his hands and feet. The Tanna Kama and Meir agree that the second time washing was done after the Kohen Gadol was dressed, because the Torah teaches that a Kohen must be ready to do the avodah immediately after washing his hands and feet, and not have the hefsek of getting dressed in between. Okay, Mishnah Zayin. Bashachar Hayolovish Pilusin shall shneim asar mana. Kohen Gadol wore white begadim twice in Yom Kippur. Once in the morning when he was marked of the shor, and the sar and the ketairas, and once in the afternoon when he removed the kalim that had been used for the Keteris. Instead of wearing the same garments twice, he wore two different sets. And the Mishnah teaches us that the sets were of different value. So, Bashachar Hayalevish Pilusin Shalshnei Masarman. In the morning he wore Pelusian garments. It's a region in Egypt. It's part of Ramses that's mentioned in the Torah. The garments of linen produced there were exceptionally fine and beautiful. Ubeinu Arbaim Hindevin Shalshmeina Meyo Zuz. In the afternoon he wore Indian garments worth 800 zuz, which were 8 mana. We learn from the Torah that the morning garments had to be of finer linen than the afternoon garments. Divrei Remeir. As they talk to the Chachamim say, in the morning he wore garments worth 18 mana. In the afternoon he wore garments worth 12 mana. In total it was 30 mana. The Chachamim mentioned the total in order to teach that if the morning garments cost less than 18 mana and the afternoon garments cost more than 12 mana, it doesn't matter provided that the total is at least 30. However, it's essential that the morning garments be more valuable than the ones that he's wearing in the afternoon. Eilu Mishal Tzibor. Who paid for it? These came from the funds that the public donated to the Beis HaMikdash. All the big day kahuna were bought with the Machas HaShekel that the Yidden gave the Beis HaMikdash every year. If the Kohen Gadol wanted to add money to buy garments that were even finer than these, he added from his own funds and not from public funds. However, the Kohen Gadol first had to donate his money to the Karban Tzibur, and only then it could be used for paying for the Begadim. Since he was the Shliach of all of Klal Yisrael in doing the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, the garments he wore had to belong to them. And the Gemara tells us stories about people that Taka spent a lot of money, on the big day kahuna, which is, beautifying the mitzvah, showing the Zekeli V'Amveyu of it. Yeah. It's interesting that people wear kittles, so even if they wear a fancy one, they wear that one on Pesach by Yom Kippur. It's more Indian of Tara, more diamond to the Mamisa, and a certain knife and else tshuva. So the more they wear the plainer one on Yom Kippur, they wear the fancy one on Pesach by the Seder. Mishnah Ches. Bale etzel parei ha'amid ben ulam lamizbeach. After putting on the big day love and washing his hands and feet in the kiyar, the Kohen Gadol began the special avodah of Yom Kippur. All of these avodah centered on one bull, 2 goats, and the keteris. The first avodah was with the bull. Bale etzel parei ha'amid ben ulam lamizbeach. He went towards his bull, and which was standing between the ulam, the antechamber, and the mizbeach. The bull stood in the northern part of the ulam, part of the area between the ulam and the mizbeach, because like all other chatayis, it belongs to the category of kodesh kadashim, which were shechted in the northern half of the azara. It was placed between the ulam and the mizbeach, so that after shechting this par, the Kohen Gadol would have to walk only a short distance when he would have to carry the blood to the kodesh. Since he was fasting, we don't want to be matriach him. We don't want him to be marching around with big bowls of blood a whole day, so we want to try to make it easier for him, especially since he's fasting. So so he shechs it right next to the mizbeach as close as possible. The head of the animal is to the south, and its back is towards the north, the pun of Lamariv, but its face is turned towards the west. The bull was supposed to face the Kodesh, but its body cannot be positioned with its head to the west and its back to the east, to the Mizbeach, because it would disgrace the Mizbeach were it to defecate in that direction. It was therefore positioned with its back to the north and its head to the south, and only the face was turning towards the Mikdash. Kohen Gadol stood in the east with his back towards the east and with his face towards the west. He leaned both of his hands on the head of the bull and he confessed his averus, and he did vidur for his averus and the averus of his family. It's a general halacha that anyone who brings a chatas must do smicha on the head of the animal and be mizvada. This particular vidur was specific to Yom Kippur. And this is what he would say: Ona Hashem. The Kohen Gadol would say Yud Kei Vav Kei as its b'chsiv, and not like we normally say it to the Shem of Adnos. The same applies to each of the 3 times that he said the Shem Hashem in this part of the Avodah. Ona Hashem, please Hashem, kaper no la'avonos v'lapsham la'chatoim. Forgive the deliberate, the rebellious, and the mistaken sins. Avonos are b'mezid, pshaim our lahachis, and chatoim our mistakes. Shavisi v'shaposhati v'shachatasil fenech haniyo beisi. that I have committed deliberately, rebelliously, mistakenly before you, I and my household. His wife and his children as well, according to some Rishonim also. Hakosav the Torah Moshe Avdecha, as is written in the Torah of Moshe. From this day of Yom Kippur, Hashem will atone for you to purify you from all your averis before Hashem. Again, he says Hashem Hashem. And after each of the 3 times the Kohen Gadol mentioned the Shem Hashem, everyone would speak out, blessed is the name of the glorious kingdom of Hashem forever and ever. And they would be mishtachava on the ground before they said these words. And the reason why we go down by the avodah is to reenact and to replay this, that ulai HaKadosh Baruch Hu will have episode Rachmanos on us and be marchelas for our averis as well. We don't have a Kohen Gadol, so we have to be the Kohen Gadol. We have to do the shlichus of that. Fine. Mishnah Tes. Besides for the bull, there were 2 other goats that were used in a special avodah for Yom Kippur. Of these 2 goats, one was brought as a chatas, and the other was sent to the Azazel, who was thrown off a cliff. And there was a girl that was used to determine which goat would meet which fate. So Polel Mizrach Hazar L'Tzvein HaMizbeach, he went to the eastern part of the Azara, north of the Mizbeach, Haskan Miminai, the deputy Kohen Gadol, the assistant Kohen Gadol walking on the right, V'roish Beis Av Mismoilei, and the head of that day's family of Kehanim was walking on his left. Each family of Kehanim had a leader, and the family of Kehanim was turned Keman Yom Kippur, performed all the services that were not done by the Kohen Gadol. V'sham Shnei Se'irim, and there were 2 goats were standing there in front of the Shar Nikanor on the Mizrach wall of the Azara. The Kalpi Haisa Shama Bosh Negarolis, and a wooden box was there, in which there were 2 lots. Shel Eshkaraya Hayu. Originally the lots were made out of boxwood. It's a very, very strong quality wood. Top quality wood, superior quality. Min Eitz V'chashavu, the Rav says. V'asan ben Gamla Shel Zahav. When Yeshua ben Gamla became the Kohen Gadol, they made them out of gold. V'yamaskir Noisei L'Shevach, and the Chacham would have mentioned Yeshua ben Gamla as being worthy of praise for having done this. Mishnah Yud. Ben Kotan also Shneim also Dad L'Kiyar. Since the previous Mishnah praised Ben Gamla for making the boxes out of gold, the Mishnah digresses to praise 4 other people for their contributions to the Beis HaMikdash. Ben Kotan also Shneim also Dad L'Kiyar. Ben Kotan was a Kohen Gadol who made 12 faucets for the Kiyar. Previously there were only 2. He made 12 so that all of the 12 Kehanim would carry the Tamid to the Mizbeach, wash their hands and feet at the same time, which was from the Payas Hasheni. Although 30 Kehanim won the Payas, the one who shechted the Tamid is not included. Since shechting a carbon is not real avodah, as is evident from the fact that it may be done by even somebody who's not a Kohen at all. So a person who does it doesn't need to wash his hands and feet. Va'afu asamuchni lakir. He also made a device, a pulley system for lowering the kir into a well each night. Shal yiu meimav nefselim belina, so that the kir's water would be connected to water in the well and thus not be disqualified by being left overnight. When an item that's fit to be brought in the mizbeach, like water, meat, or flour, it has to be put in a klishores l'shem the kedusha of the carbon or the kedusha hamizbeach, and then the item itself becomes kadosh. As such, it becomes mechuyev in a bunch of halachas, including the halacha of lina, which is staying overnight, which is that if something kadosh is left overnight, it may no longer be brought on the mizbeach. Therefore, water that remained overnight in the kiyar, which is a klishares, could not be used the next morning. In order to prevent this, Ben Kotan made a wheel that lowered the kiyar into a well at the end of the day, so that the water would merge with the water of the ground and thereby lose its separate identity. When the kiyar was brought up again, it contained new water which had not been disqualified through lina. Just interesting that there's a lot of water going on in the Beis HaMikdash. There was a stream that ran through the Azar that they used to clean. There were the mikvahs all around in the Beis HaParva, which was upstairs. And there were also the mikvahs, the regular mikvahs in the downstairs of the Beis HaMikdash. And my stomach, they were all connected to the same plumbing source, but I'm not a plumber and I wasn't there, so I don't know. Munbaz HaMelech Haya Oisa Kalides HaKelim Shal Yom Kippurim Shal Zahav. Munbaz was a melech. He made all the handles of all the kelim used in the Yom Kippur avodah out of gold. This refers to the kelim that couldn't themselves be made out of gold, such as knives, since gold is too soft for cutting, but their handles could be made of gold. Hilni Hamalka, his mother, the mother of Munbaz, made a golden candelabra and placed it at the entrance to the Heichel. What was this about? This candelabra was positioned in such a way that when it was hit by sunlight in the morning, it was very, very, very bright reflection would radiate off of it, and everyone would know that it's time for saying Kriya Shema. That was the point. She also made a golden tablet, which the parsha of Saita was written on it. So when the passage was written in the Beis Hamikdash, it could be copied from this tabla, from this tablet, and you don't need to bring a Sefer Torah special for this. The Torah says that if a husband warns his wife not to be alone with a particular man, and she does so anyways, they must separate. If she insists that she's innocent and they don't want to separate, the husband takes it to the Beis Hamikdash, where she makes a shvuah that she didn't sin. The words of the shvuah, which appear in the Torah, are written on a piece of cloth. The writing is erased into water mixed from earth. The water from the kiyar mixed with earth from the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. She drinks the water, which would miraculously prove her guilt or innocence. To avoid the need to bring a Sefer Torah from which to copy the shvuah, Hilni Hamalka donated a tablet containing the text. The tablet hung on the wall of the Heichel, and the Sefer who copied it over would copy it from there. It's very interesting that they had plaques in the Beis Hamikdash as well, like some shuls do. Nicanor Nasu Nisan L'Dal Saisav. Nicanor had doors of great craftsmanship made in the city of Alexandria in Egypt. When he brought them on a ship to the Beis Hamikdash, miracles happened to the doors. What was the miracle? The ship was battered by a severe storm, and the sailors threw one of the doors overboard to lighten its load. They wanted to throw the other door into the sea, but Nicanor insisted that they throw him in together with it. At that very moment, the storm stopped. When they reached the port of Akko in Eretz Yisrael, the first door floated up from underneath the ship. The doors were installed in the Shar HaMizrach in the Beis Hamikdash, which became known as Shar Nicanor. All right. The Chacham would mention each one of these people mentioned in this Mishnah as being worthy of praise for their contributions to the Beis Hamikdash. Now, Mishnah Yod Aleph. Part of this we mentioned in Shkalim, where the Gemara talks about the Gemara in Shkalim talks about it, and the Gemara in Yomah here talks about it as well. In contrast to the previous Mishnah, which mentioned people who the Chachamim were Mishabeach, this Mishnah lists people who the Chachamim criticized. Shel Beis Garmu, the family of the house of Garmu, who didn't want to Shel Beis Garmu didn't want to teach the process of making lechem haponim. It was a very complex process and had to shape it and had to take it out of the oven. So they didn't want to teach people how to do it. The members of Beis Havtinas didn't want to teach the identity of the grass that was used in making the ketteres that caused its smoke to rise in a straight column rather than disperse like ordinary smoke. The Garma and Beis Havtinas claimed that they refused to teach their methods because they were concerned that someone might use them for Avodah Zarah. But the Chachamim did not accept this explanation. Hugras ben Levi hayayidea perik b'ashiv l'rota l'lamed. Hugras ben Levi, who knew a special way of singing that involved manipulating his mouth with his fingers, but he didn't want to teach it. Ben Kamtzar l'rota l'lamed amaysa aksav. Ben Kamtzar didn't want to teach the process of writing the Shem Havaya, in which he tied a finger to each one of he tied a pen to each one of his four fingers and wrote all the letters at the same time. By writing the name in this way, there's no chash that the Sefer might speak in the middle, which is Asr. Al Rishenim Nemar, regarding the first people who were mentioned in the previous Mishnah, it says, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, the memory of righteous persons for blessing. Al Elu Nemar, and regarding these people who are mentioned in our Mishnah, Shem Rishem Yerkov, the names of the wicked shall rot. Because even though they tried to explain, but they had to give it over to other people, today that they should have some Messiah, then it should continue, otherwise this thing would get lost.